Asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm only asking for a friend.
I'm just asking for a friend.
I'm asking for a friend.
I'm only asking for a friend.
Hey, I'm asking for a friend.
All right. You may be seated. You guys may be seated. So, asking for a friend. We are in a new chapel series. I'm really excited for this. The title is Asking for a Friend, and that's just a great line. But I got a question real quick because this is the kind of weather that I like. It's chilly, and I'm from Philly. I didn't even try to rhyme that. But, so I like this. How many people were cold this morning? Who was like really, really cold? Like genuinely like, I'm cold. Wow, that's not that many. Who is not cold? Who likes this weather? Raise your hand if you like this weather. Man, okay, it's a lot more hands of people who like this weather. I loved it. So this morning, asking for a friend. It is a great line. I mean, have you put your hands up one more time? How many people have used that line before? I'm asking for a friend. Any honest people in here? All right, we got a couple. I'm asking for a friend. Listen, whether you say that line and you truly mean it, like you're like, hey, I'm asking for a friend, and you have a real friend that you're asking for, or whether you say that line and you're like, hey, I'm asking for a friend, yeah, and everyone's like, okay, you are asking for a friend. We really know that you're just asking for yourself. And so we're gonna go through your questions. As Mr. Norris talked about, you guys put in over 600 questions. And the key topics, a lot of them we're going to take over this series, and even into, Mr. Norris said, we're gonna do a whole series on just the most asked question more than anything. So I like that. I like that we're tackling what you wanted to talk about. And lots of people sending questions on the topic that we're gonna talk about today. And the topic that we're gonna talk about today is relationships. And not just I know somebody says, oh, and not just relationships, but like romantic relationships. That's what you guys talked about. And I'll even give you some sub-themes, ready? So here are some sub-themes under that, because a lot of questions came in about relationships, but they were this: how do we have good relationships in high school in 2021? Okay, how do we have good relationships in high school in 2021? And here's some sub-themes: in a way that honors God, you guys said, in a way that is healthy and not toxic. That's always good not to be toxic. And in a way that considers things that we are actually dealing with, like technology and other things like that. So I'll start by this. I do want to say, what we're not saying by tackling this question is that you should be dating right now, that you should be engaged in some type of relationship. We are actually not saying that you should be in a relationship or you should enter one soon. I want to make sure we get that out of the way. Matter of fact, personally, if it was up to me, I would tell you, at your age, I wouldn't even think about emphasizing relationships or exclusive relationships. But the only reason we're talking about it is because you guys want to talk about it. And so we want to talk about what you guys sent into the Bible department with all your questions. And even with that, matter of fact, so let me tackle the first question. First question asked by you guys, as I even talk about this, was the idea of what is the best age to start dating? That was the first question that I'm gonna throw out. And I'll say this: that's probably best determined, ready, by you, your parents, and Jesus. I'm gonna say it again. Probably best determined by you, your parents, and Jesus. There's no magical age for when to start. It takes in a lot of maturity, but it should be a conversation, especially between you and your parents, and a lot of prayer for like, hey, what does God want me to do in this area related to this other person? If I would tell you anything, I would say this: I would love to emphasize that you should spend time being a really, really good friend. Not just to opposite sex, but to your same sex. So be a good friend to guys, be a good friend to girls. Spend time in mixed groups. Spend time, hanging out with like lots of different people. Personally, I would emphasize that to you because I think you can learn a lot in groups. And in groups, you don't let culture rush you. Now, I know there's that one, guy or that one girl out there who's like, listen, Mr. Mayo, if I don't date someone in 9th grade, I'm not gonna date anyone in high school. If I don't date anyone in high school, I'm not gonna date anyone in college. And if I don't date anyone in college, I'm never gonna get married. And I'm gonna end up like that lady at the end of my block who has like 16 cats and she lives by herself. You won't end up like that. Like, don't let culture rush you to do something. And real quick, we are going to get to your questions, but I want to talk about like culture and groups for just a second, and I promise we'll get to your questions and relationships. And while I do it, I'm going to have our guys throw up some pictures of CCA people. So these are pictures of students at CCA who are great friend groups. I went through a lot of pictures I picked out pictures of people, who were great friend groups along the way. You might see some teachers, you might see some of your brothers and sisters in some of these pictures. But I want to say this. The reason we're doing this or the reason I talk about groups as you see some of these pictures go by is because I think groups create natural boundaries. Groups give you natural accountability, and because of groups, you get to see people in a lot of different situations, okay? Natural boundaries, natural accountability, you can see people in a lot of different situations. Real quick, how many people know that one person, right, who in your friend group, they started to, date someone or they started to hang out with someone and all of a sudden you never see them again? Anyone have that experience? Raise your hand. Okay, you never see that person again. I know I see some hands going up. Like all you guys were hanging out, and then he started to date someone, and then all of a sudden you're like, yo, what happened to Mike? Man, I don't see Mike. No, where's Mike at? Okay, he's just gone. Or like, where's Mia? I think she withdrew from CCA. She didn't withdraw. She just sucked in. It's almost like they got sucked away from your friend group by like aliens or something. But they're always with that other person, and might not be the most healthy thing. See, groups create natural boundaries, natural accountability, and you see people in a lot of different situations. And when you do things exclusively, then you might be rushed, okay? You might be rushed to do things, okay? And you don't want to get rushed, especially in this area. And I would say this to all of you, so let me see everyone's eyes. I know I say that every once in a while when I'm teaching. Let me see everyone's eyes. Culture can rush you. And I would say this, culture is rushing you, okay? Culture is rushing you. And I put it like this, culture will rush you to do more than you want, go further than you want, sooner than you truly desire. Okay? Culture is rushing you to do more than you want, go further than you want, sooner than you truly desire. And there's this consumeristic influence that's on everything in culture today, and it plays itself out in rushing you, and it plays itself out in relationships. So let me give you guys a stat about your generations. Everybody with me? This is about you guys. Stat, Gen Z is you, 40% of Gen Z, so it's you, said that they feel more rushed to do things that they are not necessarily comfortable with because of what they are seeing day in and day out. That's what you guys said. See, I think culture does a lot in this area to rush us, and it can make relationships transactional when they shouldn't be transactional. Our consumerist culture can really lead to a transactional view of relationships, and I think that's really, really dangerous. And I want to give you an example. So here's one that you guys said, another student question. This won't be up there, but I'll just say it. So hookup culture, okay? I saw 5 people just put their heads up like, I'm really listening now. Hookup culture. Here's a question from one of you. How can I be in a relationship when everyone just wants to hook up? Now, whether your definition of hookup is like making out or your definition of hookup is going even further, which I would say is more dangerous, but you think about that, whatever that is, a hookup culture is a consumerist view of relationship. It's like, hey, what can I get out of it? That's a selfish view. Think about Jesus and how he operated. That's actually the opposite of the way Jesus operated in all his relationships. Jesus operated in a selfless way, but a consumerist hookup culture is actually operating in a selfish way, and it's basically saying, hey, I want to get out of it what I want to get out of it for that moment, and I don't really care about you because you're not my treasure, and I don't really care about Jesus because Jesus is not my treasure. I just really care about what I want, like, at that time. I asked Mr. Most, I said, Mr. Most, give me a most, I don't know if you have Mr. Most in class, I know a lot of you do. So I said, give me the most quickest basic definition for why hookup culture can be dangerous. He said this. He said, vulnerability minus safety equals pain. Think about that. Vulnerability minus safety equals pain. And because you guys are being discipled all the time, and you might be like, wait a minute. I'm not being discipled by anyone. I don't have a mentor. I don't meet with anybody. But I would say you're constantly being bombarded with messaging that starts to take effect even subconsciously, and it's actually discipling you. A lot of people are discipled just day in and day out because subconsciously that bombardment that happens with you starts to take effect even in ways you don't even see or know. You're being discipled, a lot of us being discipled by media. And you might be like, all right, Mr. Mayo, like, slow down. I don't really go to the church of like Instagram, okay? as on that survey, Mr. Most gave me some stats from some of his surveys, and I know TikTok and Snapchat are higher than Instagram on the rating of usage for you guys. But if you spend enough time in a week, spend enough time in a month, spend enough time in a year, and year after year after year, you actually are being discipled by that thing you're spending so much time with, especially if you're not careful. You know, in the surveys of you guys, one of the things that was said was 50% spend at least 3 hours or more on media in a day. Some people as high, 20%, as high as 5 or 6 hours. And some of you be like, Mr. Mayo, that's low, bro. 6 hours is like the minimum for some days. Like some days I'm way higher than that. And I could see that, but I would just say this, and I'm not saying phones are bad. I'm not saying like media is bad. There's a lot of great things that can happen, but we want to just give you this information so you can make decisions. Let me see everyone's eyes one more time before I switch gears. Here's the deal. You are going to make a decision. We can't make it for you. Eventually, in a very, very short time, you might be like ninth grade, like, man, ninth grade, I got a long time to go in here. And you ask people who are graduating, they'll be like, it happened before we know it. And then you're making the decision. So it's not like, hey, Mr. Mayo's about to tell you what you should do in every That's how we're gonna be. It's giving you information so you can say, man, I can make a really good decision. And so I know you're like, man, I thought we were gonna talk about the questions that we had. And so we are, because I don't want to do a bait and switch on you and say like, hey, we're gonna talk about relationships. And then I just talk about how great groups are, which I do think that. But what I wanna do is this, to try to be helpful and to answer your questions. And I know I answered some, but we're gonna do some more. Is this. I'm gonna invite my wife to come up right now. And we're gonna talk through our story. And my wife is amazing, she's beautiful. We've been married over 18 years. Can you please give her a hand as she comes up? Hey. And we felt like it would be it might be more helpful to answer your questions, the ones that you guys had, through our story. So we're gonna kind of tell our story, and I'll say this, we won't answer every single specific question. So you're like, man, I typed in a question, you didn't answer my question. It won't be that, but we wanna hit a lot of them through what we're going to do and just talk about our journey, and hopefully you can contextualize it, because what we wanna talk about, we want to be stuff that's not just good for you right now, but even 10 years down the line, you're like, hey, that was still good, even though like things change and we don't use the same apps, and we want it to be helpful. So we're gonna start, and yeah, thanks for coming.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Good.
I'm gonna start and just share a little bit about our story, kind of, and how we met. I was close to your age. I was the summer between my junior and senior year was when we actually had our first date. We had known each other, I would say we were in the same circle for a year, my whole 11th grade, when I was in 11th grade in high school. But before that, we kind of knew of each other when I was probably your age, 9th or 10th grade. The church that I was attending, we were going through a transition with our pastor, and his best friend's dad came to kind of fill the role as pastor temporarily. So when his best friend's dad did that, Steve came along as well, because he was so close with their family, loved their family, and he attended the church for that time when I was younger, high school. But there was a little bit of an age difference, so we were kind of in different circles for a few years. But then he was actually dating my sister's friend at first.
We gotta talk about that part.
But as I matured and I got older and we were in a similar circle, then we started to notice each other and we started to date. But for me, knowing him, knowing who he was, knowing his family, knowing that we had similar circles was very comforting for me as a woman, just to feel safe with him, to know that he was from a good place, he had good intentions. I think I've heard for this generation and even older, my generation, my age, people meet a lot online. There's, different dating apps, but even on Instagram, I've heard that it's not uncommon to see someone on Instagram, you're attracted to them, you like what they post, you start messaging each other, and you start a relationship without ever being in the same room together, without ever having a face-to-face. And I even think about your school day and how you have peers, you have classmates who are virtual students, so you can start a relationship with them without ever really being together. And for me, just knowing him so long was huge. There was great value in that because I really got to see his character. I got to see who he was, We spent a lot of time in a group setting because we were in this youth group together. So I saw how he responded to my friends, how he treated my friends, how he treated his friends. I got to know his friends. And for us, that was just a huge blessing to see and meet each other that way and really get to know each other that way and build that foundation of being friends. And then we started dating. We also served together right before we had our first date. A couple weeks before we had our first date, we served at a camp together with kids. It was a 2-week overnight camp. It was hard work. It was exhausting. It was stressful. And I got to see how he handled life when he was stressed, how he treated other people when he was exhausted. And just seeing him interact with children, I think brought out other levels of attraction where, as women, we see a man with kids and you think, is he gonna be the type of father that I would want for my children someday? That's looking far ahead. But yeah, serving together was great for us, and it was a huge blessing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that goes into a couple of different things. I think it's the idea of get to know the person you're interested in beyond their social media life. And I know that's a big part of your world. So I'm not just minimizing that because it's different, obviously from when we were your age, but I think you still in a lot of ways should get to know the other person past, their social media life, like that world, because there's a lot more to a person than just what they're posting or what they're showing online. And I would also say this, my wife talked about serving. That was really, really big for us. I got a chance to see her just like she was talking about with me. I got a chance to see her with kids. I got a chance to see her in, being godly. And that was really attractive to me. And so someone asked, this is one of your questions, so I'll put it up here. They'll put it up here. What do you look for in a guy or a girl? And I think one of the things that was awesome in a group setting, watching her serve, watching her not just think about how does she look or how do people perceive her, or it was deeper than that. And when you're looking for that, you're almost getting a little deeper than just the surfacey things that we all talk about. I got to talk about this real quick because we went on our first date. So when we went on our first date, I asked her to the most super romantic movie that you could even possibly think of. It was, and all the people who are older in here might know this movie, it was Saving Private Ryan. How many people ever saw that movie? Saving Private Ryan, right? And you're thinking like Mr. Mayo, like you asked her to Saving Private Ryan, like seriously? And I did. I was like, hey, you wanna go? And she, graciously said yes. And then she didn't know what movie, so I asked her to Saving Private Ryan. It's like 4 hours of seeing people get like blown up limbs, ripped into like World War II. But it was one of those things, it was things like that also let me know this. You guys asked this question, so I wanna say this question. How do you know if someone is into the real you? I thought that was a great question, so I don't know who out there asked it, but how do you know if someone is into the real you? When they can see you in different settings, when you're not at your best, when they can, go to a movie that's like, I don't want to go see this movie, but, I really want to get to know that person. We talked about serving and those ideas. I would even say this real quick. I'm from the city, like I talked about. She was really more from the country. So it was also like culture shock when we got together. And it was good for us to see those different things because we saw those things and realized that we were still into, each other, so.
Yeah, and I love this series and this idea of being able, for us to be able to share with you. I love the quote, a wise man learns from his mistakes, but I don't like it like that. I like to think of a wise man learns from someone else's mistakes, and for us to be able to come up here and share with you things that we did right, the way we met and how we, got to know each other and got to know each other in a group setting, but we did a lot of things wrong in our relationship. And for us to have a heart for you and to be able to say, we want to share that with you because we would love to spare you heartbreak. We would love to spare you division in your families, in your relationships, because we suffered a lot of that because of the choices that we made early on. So he was an amazing Christian man. We knew each other from church. It seems like this should have been a great start to the relationship. But my parents, like he said, I was from the country. I was, sheltered. The way my parents were raised, there was not a lot of diversity at all. So for them to see me dating an African-American man, they did not see that for my future. They did not accept that. They basically at one point, it got ugly, my relationship with them, and they really forbid me to date him. I was not open and honest at the beginning, even when he shared about having the conversation with your parents about what age to start dating. I never had any conversations with my parents about dating at all. So I think this was a big shock to them when we got together and when they found out, really, because I did keep it from them. Our first date, I told them I was going out with friends. He came early, he was a gentleman, he knocked on the door, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is not gonna go well for me.
I have flowers too, didn't I?
No flowers.
Oh, wow. Not remembering.
He wants extra credit. No flowers. But he came to the door. My mom was gracious and said goodbye, and we went out. But shortly after that, we started having those conversations where my parents did not accept of the relationship. They did not want us to have a relationship. So for us, that really led to a lot of years of a fractured relationship between me and my parents. We did not go into it the right way. I was not respectful. I really even kept him in the dark for a while because I wasn't open about the fact that we weren't allowed to date. So here, he thought we were dating and things were going well, and I was keeping this whole side from him. So it was very damaging, not honoring to my parents, to each other, or to our friends, because it even affected our circles of friendships.
And I'll just say real quick, because we can keep going, but I'll just say it wasn't honoring. My wife said that, but I want to say that again. Those in here who are in 10th grade, so let me see 10th graders especially, you're going to talk about honor very, very soon, and that word is really important. And even though once I found out, I didn't like the decision. I mean, I thought like, man, why, what's wrong with me? And I was frustrated, but let me see your eyes. I think this is important. Even in my frustration, I was still not honoring of her and not honoring of her parents because of what, we decided to do. I still tried to see her, I still tried to have a relationship, and what I should have done was just honor them and kind of take a step back like they asked. And so I think that's really, really important, that idea of honor, that idea of respect. Romans 12:10 says, be devoted to one another in brotherly love, honor them above yourselves. And if I really wanted to honor her, I should have honored her parents. And so, like my wife said, sometimes you can learn from others' mistakes, and that's, hopefully for you guys, you can say, okay, I don't have to do that same thing. And if God would have been a stronger center of our relationship, I think that part would have gone a lot better. But again, hopefully something you guys can learn from.
Yeah, and I know one of the questions was about parents and what role do parents play in the person you're dating. For us, choosing to go against my parents, even though they were not coming from a place of godly parenting, their, decisions and their mindset was not one that was pleasing to God, I still should have chosen to honor them, to respect them, and I could have had conversations with them. I think back and think, what would it have looked like if I would have invited them into my life and the decisions that I wanted to make, the person that I wanted to date, if we could have had those conversations early on or before we started dating, I think it could have saved us a lot of those years of just really heartache because, we decided to make decisions on our own. And I think when you're young and in a relationship, I know looking back to us, it's so hard to take advice from somebody else because we're really blinded. We think we're in love and we're following our desires, what we want, and we can really get caught up in the relationship so quickly. And I think just to take those moments to kind of step back, make sure you have a circle of friends that you're listening to. A lot of times friends try to speak into our lives and into our relationships, and we tune them out because maybe they're not saying what we want to hear. We abused a lot of friendships as well because I use my friends to lie. I use them to help me cover up the relationship, different things like that. So I think just having a circle, your small group leaders, your teachers, your parents, your friendships, to really listen. And if they see red flags that you can't see in a relationship, I think it's really important to just pray through that and not to dismiss it because you are in love or you want to really keep going with the relationship. Because we kind of started out that way or went through that path, we did have a lot of breakups. We would try to do the right thing. We'd say we're going to be respectful. We're going to stop dating because we knew we were going against my parents. So we broke up several times, I would say. And it was hard. It is hard. Another one of the questions was how to prepare hearts for it not working out. I think, like I said about friends, if you can have a great support system outside of a relationship, if you're really growing daily in your dependence on God, when you hit those hard times in a relationship, you can be strong and you can get through it. Have, like I said, the friendships to support you. Being open with your parents, I think, is huge, which is something that just in childhood, I didn't have a great open relationship with my parents. But parents can help us to get through those times. Friendships, siblings, just depend on your siblings, I think, to get through those hard times.
Mm-hmm. And I think, we continue to pray for our relationship even through some of those tough times as we went through. But one of the things that, I would really also emphasize, even in the midst of that, is just we, as we walked through it, as we saw that struggle, as we went through it again, although there may be frustrating things that are happening, whether it's a relationship, whether it's your parents, how that goes, but I would say walking through it and continue to honor God, I'm going to go back to that, is so important, because you're going to look back and it's going to be so much more of a pleasing journey than getting there. I say this all the time. Experiences can sometimes be the teacher of fools. So everybody think about that for a second. Experience can sometimes be the teacher of fools. Some people say experience is the best teacher, but not all the time. I don't have to run into the middle of a highway and get hit by a car to realize like getting hit by a car at full speed really hurts. And sometimes it might kill you. But you think about that, like I don't have to do that. I could watch someone else do it and be like, man, I don't have to do that. And so hopefully as you're listening to us, you're just kind of learning from some of those things. And I'll also share this. This is our story, but there's a lot of other impactful stories that you have. So I don't want to do this just by show of hands. I didn't think I was going to do this, but I want to ask you, how many people have talked to your parents? Again, I know it's a lot of different parental situations if your parents are together. How many people have talked to your parents about their story of how they got together? Anyone? See some hands. That's awesome. Look around the room real quick. Keep your hand up. Keep your hand up. I think that's awesome because I think it gives you can put your hands down. I think it gives you a lot of context, and parents are so important in this journey. And there's other stories. I know all of you in here have a small group leader, and that's a great idea. Say, hey, you know what? Talk to them about some of that part because they can help you. Even though it's different, and you may say, well, you didn't have social media like us, and you didn't have all the apps, and you didn't have all the things we have to deal with, and you didn't have like a lot of this pressure, and that's true. So we never want to minimize where you're at right now in your context, but I would say this. Everybody say this word with me. I know you got a mask on, so I'll only make you say one word. Everyone say timeless. One more time. Everyone say timeless. There's some advice that's just timeless. No matter what time or what age, it's always going to be relevant. And I would say whether it's your small group leader, there's a lot of great teachers here, your parents, they can give you some timeless advice when it comes to these things, even though some advice is just for the moment that you're in. Sorry, anything else?
Yeah, just to kind of, I guess, recap or explain how we got to where we are now. My parents did have a change of heart. My dad especially was the one who was driving the decisions in the household and kind of pressuring my mom as well that she did not agree with this, that they didn't agree with this. So my dad had a heart-to-heart with his brother. And at one point in time, he had that conversation. My dad realized that he was making sinful choices. He had these ideas in his head that were not godly at all. He was not parenting in a godly way. And they gave us permission to date. So it was full circle. It was a long journey. It was years. I think it was about 4 years from when we first started dating until we got married. We did some long distance in different states, but yeah, we got through it, and God brought us together in the end. And we are just so thankful now to have that family unit that supports us. I had to mend the relationship with my parents. It was years later. We were praying through something else and fasting and praying about a decision for our family. And God put it on my heart that I had never asked for forgiveness. I had never apologized to my parents. So I really had to humble myself as a grown woman, as a married woman at that point, to go back to my parents and apologize for being dishonoring to them when I was in my teenage years. But God has really brought my family beside us. They support us in so many ways and love us and our kids. And yeah, we are happy to see the work that God did in our lives, but it definitely was painful at moments.
And even in the midst of, think about all the social and racial unrest that we've experienced. Everybody with me for like the past year and a half? Some would even say like, hey, it's been going on for like 3 or 4 years that we've been dividing more, even that, we've come together, with her. I have a great relationship, a phenomenal relationship with her parents. It took a lot of work to get there. And, you think about some of this, I didn't plan on talking about this part, but even some of this unrest, like, when we both took a step back, we're humble, we're like, hey, we need to forgive, and her parents did the same thing, it can work. It really can work. I know you see media, you see TV, and it's like, how are we gonna bring these races together? How are we gonna deal with some of these issues? But that's because God's not at the center. And when we took a step back and put God back in the center, and really both sides, I would say, humbled ourselves, I just love where we're at now. So it can really, really work, but again, it took work. So, but all that to say, and I think there's one more slide that's gonna come up, and it's just the idea of this, and pull the true principles out of the narrative. So we're giving you a narrative, but ready? Let me see everyone's eyes one last time. This is just one narrative. This is not like a one size fits all. You may say, hey man, I'm so glad you guys talked today because what you guys shared is like, that's me, that's right where I'm at. And some of you may say like, it was, kind of, some things I took from it, but again, like we said, go seek out other narratives in the midst of your questions, but make sure that you have truth at the center of it. And I think that will really, really help as you guys navigate this part. And again, I would say if it was me, I'm just gonna go back to this one more time. I love groups. I love hanging out in mixed company. I think you can learn a lot from, just being in groups and not pressuring yourself. Don't let culture rush you. But as you do, hopefully, some of what we talked about today will help you along. So anything else? All right, let's pray, and then you guys are dismissed after this. Lord, I thank you for these 9th and 10th graders. Lord, we're just in the midst of, just historically, was a crazy time. And so when you think about all the things that we're dealing with, plus throwing on top of it, well, how do we have relationships in this crazy time? And there's a pandemic going on, so can't even do the stuff that we're used to. But sometimes that's good because it helps us take a step back. So Lord, just for what we shared today, hopefully it was helpful. I just pray for each young person in this room, God, that you be with them in this area. Lord, help us not to rush anything, but to be on your timetable. And Lord, give them a great rest of their day as they process, and even in the small groups later this week, as they talk about it, that it will be good and helpful. And Lord, just be with us the rest of this day as we go out. In your name, amen. You guys are dismissed.